Hello and welcome back to Historical Humans. It is episode number 26, which means we have officially hit 1 year of Historical Humans. And today we thought there'd be no better way to end the first season of Historical Humans than talk about America's Gilded Age, the age of vast wealths, large companies, and, some smaller cultural things. My name's
Yep.
Justin Woods, and I'm joined today by Aaron Gilpin and Colum
Yo,
Coleman.
Yep. It's our 1 year anniversary, and we thank you all for making it this far with us. We're doing the Gilded Age to end it here because, like the name implies, and like the Gilded Age itself, we are very shiny on the outside, but kind of horrible if you try and pick beneath the veneer.
Deeply flawed.
Yeah, deeply flawed. We are we are struggling people.
And just like the workers back then, we still have yet to get paid.
Yeah. Hooray! It's only been a year. And we thank you all for making
Yes,
it.
thank you.
We've made it to over 1,000 subscribers. I believe we're well over 1,400 at this point, and we didn't think we'd make it this far this fast. So thank you, everyone. And with that, let's get into the Gilded Age. So the Gilded Age is roughly the period of America from the 1870s to the 1890s. It more or less begins with the Union winning the Civil War and ends with Teddy Roosevelt being elected president. It's takes a little bit of time to get going beforehand and kind of wanes a little bit after, or before both dates, so that's why it's 1870s and 1890s. But it's quite an interesting period for America.
Well, what things happened. I mean, you saw the expansion of the railroads. You saw big
Yep.
banks.
Yeah, it is the first industrial revolution of the United States. Manufacturing jobs for everyone.
yeah, and
Factory
everyone
babies.
is going to get a fair wage. Everyone's welcome to start a job, including children.
He's a unionizer. Get him. He said fair
Everyone is
wages.
welcome to have a job.
As long as you work for
Yep.
little money.
Yep. For example, did you know you can require a child as young as 8 to work a job operating heavy machinery up to 12 hours a day and only have to pay them 2/3 as much as an adult to do the same job?
I call that efficiency. Kids have more energy. They're more. Yeah, no, that's. No
Their
matter
tiny
how...
fingers can get in all the small places to clean up machines.
Fun fact, that
Chimney
was
sweeping.
actually a job children had.
Yeah.
Usually while the machines were still running.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
We can't slow production to allow for things like worker safety.
Isn't this also the time period where you get the story of is it Big John versus the machine? Is that his name? Big John?
No,
John Henry. John
is
Henry
John-
versus the machine.
it's like you're thinking of Little John, the friar from Robin Hood.
Yeah.
John Henry, the railway worker.
Yeah, this is
Nightmare fuel.
the man beats the machine, but unfortunately he dies at the end.
Yeah.
Don't we all?
Yeah. So yeah, this is a major period of technological development, and that development is held in the hands of a very few people because there are no regulations on business, there are no regulations on industry, and as a result, we see the beginning of monopolies, particularly monopolies in steel, petroleum, and transportation, as these are the industries that take off in the United States and really never stop for this period.
I do
This
want to
is like-
quickly interject, though. We mentioned the Gilded Age, but the time frame is the 1870s to the 1890s.
Yep.
So shortly after Reconstruction and right before the turn of the century. I just wanted to give that context because we talked about it, but there was no dates given.
I gave the
Yeah.
dates.
Oh, did
I
you?
gave
I
the date.
apologize.
I gave the dates. 1870s to 1890s.
Okay.
Civil War to Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, this is
That's literally what I said.
Okay.
I have a whole Did you black out?
No, but I just wanted to make sure. I'm trying to make sure we get our bases covered. I apologize.
Hammer at home. I'm watching you now. I'm gonna forget what my script says now. I just gotta watch Justin.
This is probably, I think, one of the earliest instances where you see technology develop and before ethics can catch up.
Yeah.
Because we talk about that like mostly today with like internet and computers, but before like the ethics of what a worker should be paid or who should be working or what or stuff like that. This is where industry was farther ahead than ethics itself,
Not to mention,
and they exploited this.
It's funny you should mention that, Aaron, because that's actually a point that I was hoping would come up a little later. Because there is a thing we're going to talk about in a bit called the Pinkerton Detective Agency. And a fun fact: in 2020, the company known as Amazon used it for the exact same purposes that the companies we will be discussing here in the Gilded Age used it for.
The Pinkertons still exist?
They still exist, and they were hired by Amazon to perform worker surveillance and monitor for signs of union activities at Amazon warehouses in order to prevent the unionization of the workers.
Wow.
So I was going to say something later.
Same tactics.
That's going to come up later. The Pinkertons do a lot of things. Their methods have changed. They no longer just walk into a factory and fire guns.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what happens later in the script.
I think that tornado in Illinois that destroyed the Amazon warehouse was funded by the Pinkertons.
Cover up for the Pinkertons.
Or if anyone who tried to sue, they got beat.
Yep. Anyway, back.
It's gonna be a fun discussion for me, guys.
Yeah, back to the task at hand. So, during the Gilded Age, the U.S. is going to transition from an agricultural to an industrial manufacturing economy, and what this means is there are more jobs than ever before available. But these jobs, instead of being jobs on a farm, are jobs producing things in factories. It's heavy industry, which means it's unsafe, and the country has absolutely no idea how to regulate any of it. This is going to lead to our handful of captains of industry, or as they are probably better known, robber barons, running almost all of the nation's economy. We're going to look at 6 people in particular, I believe, who basically add 90% of the wealth of the United States of America.
Jeez. Yeah, it's kind of ironic, and there's a lot of parallels I think that can be pulled. We could talk about that later, but let's.
Yeah, this is the birth of America. 5 people. Sorry, I did a head count. All right, yeah. So who wants to talk about the first guy on the list? Most famous of them all.
You go with number 1. I'll get number 2.
All right, I'll go for number 1. All right, number 1 on our list here is one John D. Rockefeller, the original Rockefeller. This man is responsible for Standard Oil, a company that mercifully no longer exists. Standard Oil quickly became the, how should I put this? The only producer of petroleum in most of the United States. If oil was involved in anything, you had to get it from Standard Oil. You could not go anywhere else. And this was because Rockefeller had a habit of immediately buying out any neighboring company he could afford to buy. He bought out startups, he bought out established companies. He ensured that there would never be any competition for him, because anytime competition started, he just wrote a check and made it go away. The rich people solution, just throw money at the problem.
And if that doesn't work, you're not throwing enough money.
Yeah, he's a hero to all of us.
Yep. Yeah, and he was probably the original, I'm going to say, McDonald's, because whenever any site unionized, he declared that location unprofitable and closed it immediately.
I'm sorry, McDonald's used to do that?
Used to.
You know, I shouldn't be surprised.
I'm
The
just
fact that
I'm just nodding. There are many news articles from the mid 2010s about this happening. We are making enemies of all our sponsors, and I love it.
We have no sponsors. It's perfect.
Exactly. We will
Eh.
never have sponsors. We can't sell out. We're too anti-corporate.
I will support Cloak brand though.
Mhm.
I do like Cloak. They're fun.
Yeah. Basically, all you had to do was a word of people complaining about poor working conditions at a Standard Oil site for that site to get shut down and a neighboring site take over its production. Because Standard Oil has major redundancies on account of the fact that it keeps buying out neighboring companies. So it has more work sites than it actually ever needs. It allows it to just survive destroying itself. It's amazing.
The logic of that is like, I own so many houses, I don't care if one burns down because I'll just move into the next one.
Yeah. No, I have so many houses that the second the floorboards start to creak, I can burn one down and move on. That's the logic.
No, you don't burn it down. You commit insurance fraud, collect the money because you own the insurance company. So you'll investigate yourself, quote unquote, and then get the insurance money and then move into the new house.
Yeah, definitely. The other things Standard Oil did, just to make them an even sleazier Gilded Age company, is in 1881, it became the world's first trust because it established the management of Standard Oil under a board of 9 trustees, and with Mr. Rockefeller at the head, and this would become the corporate model that all the other major corporations of the Gilded Age would follow, and that many corporations follow to this day. He literally invented corporate economics.
I knew he was evil for more than one reason, but I think that really takes the cake.
Yep. And within a year of doing this, because of this consolidation, because now there's 9 heads on the Hydra, within a year, Standard Oil controls all oil business within the United States of America.
So what you're telling me
very
is
few exceptions.
So to kill the Hydra, we just have to use arson. Got it.
Yeah.
So
that is how you kill the Hydra in mythology, to keep it from growing
cut off
heads.
one head, 2 more shall take its place. I shall have the power of Thor. There
but
we go.
if you use fire, it will work.
Like going back to the board of trustees, though, that is a huge monumental ordeal, and I think the timing of this really plays into effect too, because a lot of companies prior to this didn't have that corporate executive model. They utilized a lot of like familial ties, like, this was my father's business, now it is my business, and it will be my son's business upon my death.
Yeah, there's it definitely had a more direct, smaller focus. But when you're running a company the size of a continent, you can't do it all by yourself. And this board of trustees system sort of allows delegation without responsibility, which is he doesn't have to give up his power, but he also doesn't have to do everything. And this makes Standard Oil the most well-known monopoly of its time. And it is that is Standard Oil's story. It is ultimately destroyed by something we'll talk about later, the Sherman Antitrust Act, which gets passed and effectively begins the end of the Gilded Age, as the government now will start cracking down on these after some 20, 30 years of just unchecked decadence.
Yeah.
Mr. Rockefeller does have some redeeming qualities, especially compared to a few of his contemporaries. When he gets old, he does become very philanthropic. He gives a lot of money to a lot of different places. Most notably, he funds the establishment of the University of Chicago. He additionally, on his own initiative, establishes the Rockefeller University, the General Education Board, and the Rockefeller Foundation, which is a medical center. So he actually takes some initiative with the money he's earned by demolishing workers' lives for decades. and actually does turn it into something that is good and lasting good. And compared to most of the others, this seems to be actual genuine humanity peeking through this man.
Yay, penance.
I wouldn't exactly call it a penance. This is
Yeah, it's
to
not
me
it's
that
not exactly a penance, but like most of the others either don't engage in philanthropic services or they merely pay lip service to it with some, on my death the peasants may read, from my collection, or here's, a few $1,000s for whatever small thing. Rockefeller actively engages in multiple investments. He's not a
it
good man,
had
but he does try some. He does try his hand at it.
he was just too rich to actually know what
Yeah, I have too much
what was
money.
actually.
What do I do with it all?
But also, he lived such a rich life that he had no real concept of what people's woes were. In his eyes, the worker unionizing costed him profits. Therefore,
And
the workers were his natural enemy. So support, even if he really felt bad or actually felt like he should do something, he would have done something for the workers that he exploited for all those years.
And unlike some of his contemporaries that we're going to talk about, Rockefeller's style really speaks for him in the sense that he came for money. From money, his family had, uh, they weren't, millionaires like they are after him, but they had wealth, which is why his strategy towards competition is buy it out instead of outcompete it. This is very much a rich man's mentality towards the game.
So yeah, he was essentially, because this is where we think capitalism real, like when we think of capitalism, this is like the era. So we think about competition, but when it comes to Rockefeller, competition was the enemy.
Yeah.
Or at least another one of his enemies. We think capitalism produces the best because of competition. It can't produce the best when someone buys everyone out.
Yeah, it's the House of Mouse model.
Yep.
I dare not speak its name, for we fear its army of lawyers and their legion of copyright strikes.
Yes, we are
I
trying
know.
not to get sent to Mauschwitz.
Oh wait, we don't actually work for them. They can't sue us for that name.
Yeah, or Dachau.
We don't. All right. Anyway, darkness. Moving on. So this is the most famous capitalist with the most famous corporation.
I will.
Who's next on the list?
Well, before I jump into Andrew Carnegie, I do want to point out that Rockefeller's legacy does still live on in the foundations and in the name that is scattered on everything. And also, Rockefeller's descendants ended up joining the U.S. government. Most recently, Nelson Rockefeller, I believe, was a senator from West Virginia. But
Of course it was.
yeah. Anyways,
of course, it's West Virginia.
well, I mean, look at where they made their money.
The energy people are representing the energy state. That's a shocker.
Yeah. Anyways, Andrew Carnegie, who is most commonly known for the Carnegie Steel Company, which eventually merges with J.P. Morgan to form United States Steel. Man, we really do like these conglomerate monopolies. And this company was so large that it would generate more than 300 billion US dollars in modern value.
Yep. That is literally the amount of money that Andrew Carnegie had when he retired and died.
So think about like Elon Musk or like Jeff Bezos, who have like 200 odd billion. This man had roughly 100 billion more, so he wasn't poor like them.
I know, speaking of Bezos, I know he recently said that like I think like over 100 million would be donated or something like that, or at least a good portion of his wealth would be donated on his death. But who knows where that money is actually going to go?
Yeah.
And the other thing with that is there is a modern philanthropic trend of donating your wealth and not passing it along. One, to eliminate generational wealth, and two, because a lot of people want their families to earn it or to work for it. But yeah,
Work.
well, it's hard to work when you've got a platinum spoon in your mouth.
Yeah,
So they go from a platinum to silver. Okay.
No, it goes from silver to golden to platinum.
Oh yeah.
It's like league ratings.
They're getting a major step up by just being this guy's kid, but like, there is the philanthropic thing. But anyway, Andrew Carnegie, not one of the people who believed in giving your money away. No siree.
No, and another thing that he really wasn't a fan of were unions. Well, sort of. He generally favored unions, but in practice supported management Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel, which faced off against the Pinkerton. Oh, yeah, that was a run-on sentence. In practice, he supported management.
Yeah, basically, he publicly said that workers should have representation, and a lot of his business workplaces had unions. It's just he felt they should have representation that listened to him.
Yeah, so he still wanted the overall control, didn't want to quite give that up, but he actively fought against it, and that's where the next line comes from, where he had people from the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel who faced off against the Pinkertons, who we mentioned previously. And in this specific instance, the union agreement ended with Carnegie Steel on July 1st of 1892.
Yep.
And now we go to July 6th, which starts the Homestead Strike.
Yeah, there's a few things that do happen in the middle there, as the Amalgamated Association is the largest iron and steel union in the United States at the time. It is a very powerful union, and it's not going to back down easy.
Well, easy is a interesting way to put it. So basically, Carnegie gave the plant manager, Frick. Do we have his first name, or is he just referred to as Frick?
His last name is Frick, which I find very appropriate. I do not have his first name. Okay. It may have been mentioned once as John, but there were a lot of proper nouns in this research.
Okay. Funny enough, his name is Frick, and the word that you use instead of using the F word is Frick.
His name is Frick, and apparently he gave none, as we will see.
Yeah, so Carnegie,
that's where it comes from.
Yeah, Carnegie gave Frick a blank check to bust the union ahead of the deadline. And in June, Frick takes a very unique approach to the situation and decides to just cut the workers' wages and barricades the factory with barbed wire. Because, that's one way to bust the union, I guess.
Well, I wonder if the workers decide to do something about that.
Yeah, it's very fun. There is something that didn't make the notes, but the nickname for the factory at this point becomes Fort Frick. Because he's literally like fortifying it like he's going to war.
Well, what he decides to do after that, though, on July 2nd of 1892, he decides to fire all 3,800 workers.
So that's basically declaring war.
One day after the union contract ends, he's like, well, see you guys.
Such bad things happen.
And then on July 6th is when the Pinkertons really get involved. 300 Pinkerton agents sail by barge to occupy the factory. The union and their families blockaded the docks, and there were 12 hours of gunfight. So this actually ended up being a all-out battle.
Yep.
With only 3 dead Pinkertons. Only.
Yeah. It's the gunfight in the sense that people were occasionally popping out and shooting guns at other people hiding behind objects.
But it did turn into a brawl.
Yep. Yep. Surprisingly, the Pinkertons don't win, which
good.
Well, because they surrendered and were escorted to jail.
Yeah, they're outnumbered 10-1.
Well, they were 300 versus 3,800 workers alone, not including their families.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had it coming.
They were just trying to enter the factory. Oh.
Those Pinkertons had it coming. I have zero sympathy.
And, well, you're going to love the next part, because the next part of this is mob rule. As the Pinkertons are being escorted to jail, I believe the mob sets fire to the ships they came on
Yes. Yes. This
and
is
proceeds to
great.
attempt to beat the men as they are being escorted to the prison by the
Honestly, that's
rest of the
fair.
Union.
That is fair
Jeez.
and understandable. They are heroes.
Well, and then only 6 days later, they decide to dispatch National Guard soldiers, to which 8,500 soldiers were sent to the plant.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because the government only gets involved when the
Mhm.
companies are in trouble, right?
Yeah. Basically, Frick sent word to the government that these workers were rebelling and attacking people, and they were shooting up lawful employees because they'd all been fired, and so the government comes in and basically treats them like a rebelling army.
I've heard this before. Anybody heard of the Battle of Blair Mountain?
Yeah, yeah, we
If you
talked
don't
about this.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, if you don't know, you definitely need to check that out.
Do you want to give a elevator pitch of what that was?
Uh, let's see. Essentially, it's the coal miners go on strike, and funny enough, Pinkertons are there, and it goes into an all-out war essentially, where the workers essentially are fighting against Pinkertons and anyone else who was hired by the coal mine companies. And then it got to the point where the U.S. government had to get involved, and they also literally bombed these people. And if you think, oh, this is just the 1800s, look what happened in Pennsylvania in the 90s.
It's always Pennsylvania. This is Homestead is Pennsylvania.
Yeah, guys, remember,
Why is it always Pennsylvania?
Because their
workers.
workers want rights.
Remember, kids, if unions didn't work, companies wouldn't go to such extremes to keep you from joining them.
Yeah, I would definitely say we're pro union here. Although, if either one of you try to unionize, you're out of here.
I'm management. You fool. I'm Justin. You and I are the board of trustees. He's an employee. He's already a union. He's a union of one.
Damn it. Yeah. If Aaron refused to work, then things get awkward.
He's at his maximum
Hey,
collective.
we'll have a
bargaining.
pizza party, Aaron. Is that okay?
Oh, all
You
right.
can't buy me with food. I
Yes, we
want
can.
health care.
Oh, anyways,
I.
moving on.
So do That's fine, man.
On July 16th, all the mill operations were replaced or had replacement workers already working. So it didn't take very long for the soldiers to come in for the company to find other people to fill those positions.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing here with how the company filled in, and I didn't put it in the notes because it was quite a bit racy, and I wasn't sure we were gonna have the tone for that. But the reason why the company was Carnegie Steel was able to find so many replacement workers so quickly was because the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel was a whites only union.
Oh.
So
Ooh.
what Carnegie did was he imported 3,800 freed Africans from the South to work in Pennsylvania, which they gladly took because Jim Crow is going on in the South, and they want out.
Ooh.
Is this the start of the Great Migration?
Yeah, this is during the Great Migration because this is 1892, so this is near the end of the Gilded Age. This is the last decade. The Great Migration, I believe, begins in the 80s.
Well, that puts a little damper on the
But,
union aspect, but
yeah,
then
it is
again,
not-
a good Pinkerton's a dead
this is-
Pinkerton.
Yeah, but let's be honest here. These those people still exist. just warning you there, and those are
Oh
still
no,
they still
they're
exist.
gonna There's no sponsorship for us. Damn,
We can't condone actually killing people that exist still.
I didn't condone it. I didn't support it.
But if a
Well,
company
actually,
hires the Pinkertons, then you know that they might be
It's not a good
ethically
thing.
questionable.
Yep.
But moving on to ethnically questionable,
Yep.
like Rockefeller, Carnegie also tried to wash his legacy towards the end of his life when he began an initiative called the Carnegie Libraries. And what he did was he donated millions and millions of dollars all across the countries to small towns everywhere so that they can open up libraries. And it was one of the earliest philanthropic works in the United States, which most libraries, if they are still around, are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which in the month of December will be a series that Colum and I will be tackling called Historical Humans Heritage.
Yep. It's the second Triple H series that we have going right beside Historical Humans, which had its second episode air this month. So we finally got that off the ground just before the end of our first season.
Yes. So we've got some more great content coming up in season 2 coming up. But it ties in perfectly because the Carnegie Libraries were able to give libraries to a lot of small towns that just quite frankly couldn't afford it. And it helped bring education to millions and millions of people who couldn't access it prior.
Yeah, you may notice the philanthropicness of the various people that we go through steadily decreases as we go down this list.
It can't get much worse, can it?
Can it? And with that,
Aaron,
would you like to introduce our third player in this game, our third winner of the Gilded Age?
Cornelius Vanderbilt.
That man has the most Gilded Age name out of everyone on
That
this
is an
list.
evil villain name. You get to the final boss battle and it's Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Mega Monopoly Man.
This man's bread and butter was shipping in railroads because during this time period, we see the connection of the West Coast to the East Coast with the Transatlantic Railroad. And God, was that paved with blood and tears and sweat and so many bodies.
Fun fact. That wasn't Cornelius Vanderbilt.
I know, but in general.
That's the next guy.
Oh, so they get worse.
They get worse. This list gets worse as time goes on.
But well, I guess I got a little ahead of myself. When it came with him, he basically was in charge of shipping and railroads, specifically Accessory Transit Company, the New York and Harlem Railroad, Hudson River Railroad, New York Central Railroad, the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railroad.
Yep.
He bought, you take a look at the Monopoly board, he bought all those railroads.
That's why it's on there, by the way, Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron,
I'm well aware.
He didn't consolidate these into a single company. No, he pretended they were 5 separate companies that he all happened to own.
Funny enough, this will actually be a strategy after Teddy Roosevelt bust the trust. Essentially what they do, so when Standard Oil's like big breakup happened, it essentially said they couldn't all be one company, but it didn't mean that one person couldn't own them.
Yeah.
But again, a little ahead of ourselves. So he in 1873 offered the first and only rail service from New York to Chicago.
Yep, you could get a direct line right into the Midwest, which was not something you could do before.
And then from the Midwest, you would actually go. Chicago was one of the biggest train hubs, and you could actually you would go from Chicago to all the way out to California.
Yep.
I think it was like something like $5 to go all the way out to California, which is like $200 today, but
But it offered an alternative to the long cart and buggy across.
It basically, you didn't have to Donner Party it anymore.
Hey,
yeah,
the Donner, yeah.
So he got.
They were delicious.
I wasn't gonna make that joke, but you did.
I saw it on your lips, and I have to save you from yourself.
So essentially, he got to start using through passenger ferries. Usually, most notably, you would think of ones like on the Mississippi, like with what's his name? Mark Twain, who also sailed up and down the ferries, on ferries up and down the Mississippi. He was bribed to move his operation away from competitors.
Yeah, he got paid to leave Georgia and never come back.
Man, I wish I could get paid to never come back to some place.
Yeah.
Especially
Especially
Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
What's
basically what he was doing, he was running basically from like Georgia to Louisiana and was just running around Florida and just screwing with everybody's payments.
So essentially, he's one of the big railroad gurus. He didn't really give away much at the end of his life. He donated like $1 million to Central University in Nashville, and then it renamed itself Vanderbilt University.
For
Yep.
only $1 million, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Perpetual naming rights.
That is 1 million in 1890s money.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there wasn't a good calculator for that long ago.
If you already don't like this guy, he quite literally left no money to his wife or second wife or his 8 daughters. All of his male relatives got something in his will though.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It was a career misogynist. I think the smallest amount I saw in there was his grandchildren at minimum got $4.75 million, so long as they were male.
Also, I found a converter. It's roughly about $32.75 million.
There you go. Found the converter. There we go. That's a decent chunk of money for a Tennessee university.
Well, there are companies that will pay 25, 30 million for one season. I mean, I think that's what crypto paid in Los Angeles, crypto.com.
Yeah.
So yeah, to get a perpetually named university forever.
Yeah, not crypto the super dog.
I would
that
sponsor
would be
him.
awkward.
Yeah. I would also like to also note, because I was doing a little bit more research on the Pinkertons. So after the Homestead strike, they did pass the Anti-Pinkerton Act in 1893, which basically said the government was no longer allowed to use the Pinkerton Agency as a private contractor after it became public knowledge that they were beating strikers and killing them.
Yeah, it's a very fun thing. The 1890s do mark the end of the Gilded Age precisely because of legislation like that.
It does apply to other agencies like the Pinkertons.
Yeah, but it's just basically like there's this general wave of legislation of no, that's not something we're going to tolerate in society anymore.
Also, fun fact: the Pinkertons started in Chicago.
Yep, they did. They started in Chicago. Their original job was basically to be the pre-FBI, because their original task was, I believe, money laundering and people making counterfeit currency.
These are essentially, not only are these guys the ones that broke up strikers, these are also the ones who essentially were hired to fight Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, and Jesse James.
Yep, they are very much
the ones
frontier.
that fought Jesse James.
Yep, they were hired to track him.
It's the front. They are frontier justice lawmen, which means they use violence and espionage.
Wow.
Yep.
And they are very good at it.
Or at least they were supposed to be.
And we're very good at it.
But funny enough, they have their own website.
Yeah.
Pinkerton.com.
Yes.
And I'm reading their story right now.
Oh, it's so fun. While you're doing that, Aaron, I'm going to move on to the blandest member of the five here. A man whose last name is a very much household name associated with people who think they're better than you for no good reason.
Wait. Did we talk about Leland?
That's the name.
Sorry. Okay, I wasn't sure. Sorry.
Leland Stanford of university fame. Now, this man is a unique one here. See, Leland, he was a robber baron. He owned the Central Pacific Railroad, which was part of the Transcontinental Railroad project at the start of the Gilded Age. From 1862 to 1869, he was one of 2 rail companies that had exclusive rights to build a railroad across the entirety of the United States of America. Stanford's company built from the east and was partnered with the Union Pacific Railroad, which was created by Abraham Lincoln for the express purpose of connecting to Leland Stanford's rail lines. They were set to meet in 1869 at Promontory, Utah, where the CEOs of both companies were set to nail in a golden spike to unify the country. They both missed.
Like
Neither of them had ever swung a hammer in their life, and for the life of them, they could not hammer in the last spike.
oh,
The most ironic thing
I-
ever.
so for a minute I thought when you said that they missed that they were at like different geographic locations.
No. Although a fun fact, people who are plotting the line for both sides would often end up drive past each other and screaming at one another because the line wasn't supposed to meet up here. Because both companies got paid by the mile. So guess what they did? They went in circles. And they got pissed at each other because Central Pacific and Union Pacific would just sort of, their line marker men would just drive past each other and they just look at one another like, fuck you.
Oh God. The Umbrella Academy meme of just staring at each other as you drive past.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that. It's like that. Yeah, the lines finally met, and that is really Leland Stanford's whole claim to fame as a robber baron. Is this one railroad company that was picked because it was the dominant rail company in California. He got to have a very fun time chiseling his way through the Rocky Mountains in the middle of winter. He also did a couple of things. This is where it becomes the more interesting for you. See, of the big five here, he's the politician. He was the governor of California during the Civil War from 1862 to 1863.
Wait, the project started in 1862.
You wonder why he got picked.
Huh.
Ooh.
There's a lot of corruption going on. The general cycle of power at this time is the U.S. Senate controls Congress, and senators are regularly bribed for money. There's an entire system we can go into detail on after the Big Five, I believe. But basically, he's governor of California for exactly 1 year, just long enough to get this contract.
Perfect. Makes sense.
Then, at the end of the Gilded Age, from 1885 to 1893, so 2 terms, he is the U.S. Senator. Helping, shall we say, delay or limit certain anti-business legislation.
Seems like a slight conflict of interest.
Well, no, he's in Congress to protect his business.
I know that, but it seems like a slight conflict of interest.
Yeah. Same year he gets elected, he founds Stanford University in 1885.
Wow, busy year.
Which is what everyone knows him from today because it's Stanford. It's an Ivy League school.
That didn't accept me.
And anyone who attempts to go to college either gets into an Ivy League school or hates Ivy League schools.
We hate.
As you should.
So, just to recap, we have Rockefeller, who's got Rockefeller University.
Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt University, and now Stanford. Poor Carnegie didn't get a university, or is there just a smaller Carnegie University?
Isn't it Carnegie the one also who came from nothing?
Carnegie came up. Carnegie came up from nothing. He started off, I believe, as a telegraph operator for rich men.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
He would parrot their stock purchases with his own wages to make himself more money.
Yeah, so essentially,
I believe that was him.
Out of all of them, Carnegie's the only one who could ever possibly be claimed as a self-made billionaire, but he did it through
the worst possible way.
Literally. So essentially, all of these people, in order for them to have acquired the wealth they did, they had to exploit someone even if they came from nothing.
You
Yep.
notice how it's usually the lower and ethnic minorities are the one that are getting the most exploited.
Yeah, when
Yep.
white people didn't want to be exploited, companies turned to everyone else.
Also, I did look it up. There is a Carnegie University in Pittsburgh.
Yep. There
So-
you go. These guys.
Well, it's
He's got one.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but I don't. But I do not believe that came about as Andrew Carnegie making donations or establishing it. I
Actually,
believe
it
came
is.
about his family.
Is
No,
it?
he did establish in 1905.
Well, that was missing from all of his bios.
Well, I guess it's the least important thing he ever did.
I guess. Yeah.
that is very
He
interesting.
established the Carnegie Technical Schools.
Yep, that's very nice. All right, so everyone's got a university, and then we have the man that would outlast them all. None other than the one, the only, J.P. Morgan of J.P. Morgan Bank fame.
Boo!
It is.
Oh.
This is the dawn of him. And if you think his company's bad now, it was so much worse at the beginning because J.P. Morgan starts off by being friends with London's Peabody firm, which is a British investment company.
No, the Peabody.
Yeah.
Aaron
it's
is
all tied
freaking out. He
together.
knows who these people are.
Jesus
And what this
Christ.
allows him to do is take the wealth of England, still an empire, and funnel it into highly profitable new ventures that he has his finger on in America at will.
God.
Yep. He finances the beginning of United States Steel, International Harvester, and General Electric.
Not International Harvester.
Not GE.
GE does not exist without JP Morgan. He literally bankrolls them.
So he's the
This
one who's
man-
also bankrolling all of the military equipment that GE also produces.
Yes.
He bankrolled everything for these companies in exchange for stock. He is the mafia of corporations.
And people hated it. And police were always going after Al Capone.
Yep.
Well, that's because he did it
his-
illegally. You
Yep.
play above
His,
table, you're good.
His favorite thing to do was to form conglomerates out of existing companies. Basically, he'd look at an industry, look at who the top competitors were, and buy stock in them and force them all to work together to have a single streamlined, apparently competitive service. So that no matter whose boat you bought or whose rail line you went on, you paid money to JP Morgan.
This is the same man who also conspired with other corporate heads to overthrow the US government and establish an oligarchy under FDR because they did not like the New Deal Act.
Under FDR, he was dead by FDR, I believe.
Oh, I guess it's the C. Oh, sorry, it was the CEO of J.P. Morgan.
Yeah,
Bank,
CEO
sorry,
of JP
at the time.
Morgan. Yeah, the actual JP Morgan is a little bit different. And we'll get to some of the things he does because he actually bails the U.S. government out of financial crisis later in his life.
Yeah, that was an that's a
That was
whole
an interest. That's the whole thing. But for most of his life, he spent most of his time negotiating with companies that were fighting one another to arrange price fixes so that these corporations would not be devastated by harmful practices like competition or a free market.
And
Uh,
then
Yeah,
can
why
I,
would a company want free market?
can I
he
put
would
the
prevent-
tinfoil hat on soon?
Yeah, he would prevent these things from happening again in exchange for stock and money, which he would then use to bankroll his next conglomerate, arrange his next price fixing. And, basically this guy was the bank of corporations.
He was the puppeteer. He was the grand puppeteer who helped bring some of these conglomerates together.
And if United States Steel sounds familiar to anyone, that's because it came up with Andrew Carnegie as J.P. Morgan basically fuses himself to Andrew Carnegie to create United States Steel out of Carnegie Steel. And Andrew Carnegie walked away with $300 billion US.
So you can imagine how much Morgan got out of this.
Yep.
All right.
He's also very famous for having formed a conglomerate that included the White Star Line, the
Ooh.
manufacturer of the Titanic.
Yes.
And He supposedly had tickets. He did, in fact, have tickets on the Titanic's maiden voyage. But at the last minute, day of, he decided he did not feel well enough to travel, claimed unspecified illness, and simply did not board.
Yes.
The Titanic goes down on its maiden voyage several weeks later, killing thousands.
Yes. So, you know, did he know something that we didn't know? Was there some greater reason behind this?
It's a boat built by a company that he owns and operates.
Like, I will never ride that. We cut corners.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, it's bad. His contributions to society at the end of his life was he was a prolific book collector and donated his personal library to the state of New York to become the Morgan Library and Museum. Additionally, in 1907, there was a stock market panic, and he prevented the collapse of this panic by convincing the US government to hand over its monetary deposits to him to be distributed as financial aid as he saw fit. He successfully kept most of the banks from losing their solvency and collapsing, which did at least keep a lot of Americans from losing their entire life savings to the panic. However, I'm certain you can guess which companies got the bail money. Ones associated with him.
With J.P. Morgan.
This is the man who. This is the company. This man started the company that would eventually be owned by. That would essentially be associated with Chase Bank.
Yes.
Yeah. These people have made apologies in the last like 20 years for committing massive fraud against their own what's the word, customers. This is the one that outlives them all. This is the darkest hour. This is the true monster of the age. The one no man could kill.
Oh God! And what? How? And J.P. Morgan's the one who ends up like dying in like Rome, right?
Oh yeah, he spends a lot of time overseas.
But he was also
He dies in the 20s, I believe.
he also was like an avid yachtist. Essentially, when you think of billionaires and yachts, J.P. Morgan essentially kind of became the face of that concept.
Yep. All right. So with that there, do you guys want to talk about all the immigrants and workers that came to America to feed this machine, or do we want to talk about the politicians that enabled it?
So we just covered essentially we've already really kind of talked about the Antitrust Act essentially, right?
Well,
we've touched on it briefly, and that exists. We haven't gone into what it does. I believe that is in the politics section.
Let's do politics and then let's talk humans, because we could talk about the humans for quite some time.
All right, so we'll do the politics. All right. So the Gilded Age was known primarily for political corruption and exploitation. Congress had a reputation of being inefficient and corrupt, which was a bit of a change from the Congress of the U.S. Civil War, which was very prolific in its creation of laws and other such bills. You know, given the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation comes out under that Congress, even though that is an executive order, it is backed up by Congress approving a number of approving the amendment to the Constitution. This Congress, for the next 30 to 40 years, will publish almost no legislation.
Wow.
Congress supports monopolies and big businesses, and big businesses want the status quo to be maintained. And the effect works like this. Congress is dominated by the Senate. Basically, whatever the Senate does, Congress, the House follows along with. So big businesses would quite literally and very much openly trade money for political favors. They did this to the federal government, state governments, and local governments. under what is known as a political machine, which is basically where a small group of people or even a single person controls the politics of an area, and they will exchange jobs and favors and corporate agreements for votes in the next election cycle. So it's basically like when I believe Amazon was looking to set up a new warehouse or whatever, and all those little towns started bidding on it. Except, the towns don't just openly bid on it; they just hand they just hand money to Amazon and are told that everyone who works at Amazon will vote for us next election. And Amazon makes sure you vote for them next election, you get fired.
Yeah.
That is how the political machine works. Because secret ballots aren't a thing yet.
Yet.
They are now. They weren't then. And this all finally comes to a head in 1877 with the Interstate Commerce Act. Basically, the railroads have gotten greedy, they've overreached, they are preventing shipments from reaching where they need to go for the sake of price gouging. So the Interstate Commerce Act comes along, and this prevents railroads and only railroads from granting special rates to certain companies, which is how a lot of these companies were undercutting their competition, as they were paying off the railroads to haul their freight at, half price. They were, it's prohibited the pooling of markets, which is the idea of basically my company only operates in the Midwest, your company only operates west of the Rocky Mountains, your company only operates in the American South. You're no longer allowed to do that. And you can't discriminate on the length of the haul, and it establishes the Interstate Commerce Commission to oversee it, which means that there is a congressional commission that looks at this and reviews it for violation, but it's not part of the Justice Department and thus really has no legal teeth. 3 years later, we get the big one, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. This is the one that begins the end of the Gilded Age. Price fixing out the window. You can no longer agree with your competitors that all apples will cost $20.
Unless you're part of OPEC.
We don't talk about them. They don't exist yet. This prevents any commercial practice that interferes with interstate or international trade, which basically means if you are trying to keep the government or consumers from buying products from out of state or overseas, you cannot do that, which a lot of monopolies did. Standard Oil was very careful to make sure that only Standard Oil was sold in the United States of America. Things like that. They make it illegal to monopolize any part of trade or commerce in the United States of America. Now, this is all enforceable by the Justice Department, meaning that the courts and criminal charges can be brought against you for violating it, not just a slap on the wrist from those very bribable senators. However, it goes into law, and for 10 years, no one uses it. Till one Theodore Roosevelt.
A man after my own heart.
Teddy the Trust Buster comes along. Because, honestly, the monopolies argued very successfully for a decade that they weren't interfering with trade. They weren't monopolizing trade. They were just the result of a fair and free market.
Okay.
And if you break us up, we'll just reform again under someone else, because this is the end of our evolutionary line. This is the inevitable progress of mankind. Theodore Roosevelt disagrees very strongly, and he is not a man to be subtle about it.
The man was a hunter, and if they were supposed to be the peak of humanity, he was going to hunt it, and he did.
His
This,
nickname was the Bull Moose for a reason.
Yep. And Theodore Roosevelt's presidency marks the definitive end of the Gilded Age. It wanes in the 1890s because of the introduction of this act, because people start turning against the Pinkertons with their violence, and the corporations and the corruption. All kind of people finally get sick of it. It's too much to hide, and Theodore Roosevelt comes along and he just hits them all with a hammer and shatters them.
Speak calmly and carry a big stick.
Yep. This is the end of the Gilded Age.
Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of valid criticisms about Teddy Roosevelt, but what he did to the businesses?
Yeah,
That was
And the
not
fact he
one.
established the national park system, I will always hold respect for him for that.
Yes, we must preserve nature so that I can hunt more of it.
Hey, you know what? He
That works.
yeah.
I love the logic. You have to love the logic behind him.
It's a very fair logic. Like, I would rather hunt the bear in its natural habitat.
Well, also in some nature reserves, if a particular individual of a species is acting unusually violent and is actually becoming a detriment to the group, they will open that one up to hunting.
Well, when I lived in Virginia, there were a number of parks and other areas that had, I believe, biannually, you could hunt deer in them to prevent the deer population from growing too large and eating out all the plant life.
To be fair, though, the amount hunters don't contribute as much as they think, or at least they say they do.
But like
natural predators do more.
Natural predators do more, but however, every other year you could hunt them because hunting is one, a very popular pastime in Virginia, and two, it helps.
Yeah, I mean, like in a place like Virginia, 1 million
deer.
Yeah, in Virginia, I can see it helping more, but like here in like the Midwest, we have more deer than people sometimes, especially per county.
Yeah. Look, Virginia is much more heavily forested and rocky, so it's it's a much more manageable population.
Yeah,
we're not gonna miss a few deer, but the whole point was he wanted to preserve the pieces of nature because he thought they were beautiful. Granted, it may have been under the premise of hunting reserves, but we're getting lost. Like, Teddy Roosevelt put a beautiful bow on the Gilded Age, and I truly could not think of another political figure that would be able to accomplish this. Genuinely. Like,
well, it's so funny how he actually got into power because he was given the VP. He was given the VP position. I believe it was under. Was it Garfield? Either way.
I don't recall that. I don't have his full career up. I just have him as the end mark of the Gilded Age.
They were like,
it was one of the people who he was essentially elected under as VP because he was considered too progressive by conservative Republicans of the time because of his idea of wanting to bust up the trusts. And then whoever he was VP for got assassinated. And then suddenly everyone collectively needed a new pair of pants. McKinley, yep. That's right. So yeah, everybody
Garfield didn't get shot.
Yeah, no, it was McKinley.
Yeah, Garfield didn't get shot. Never mind. He almost drowned in a river. That's right.
He's much stupider than that.
But yeah, so Teddy Roosevelt technically wasn't really elected the first time. They just thought that if they gave him the VP position, he couldn't do anything until McKinley got shot. Yeah, so that was great.
Well, and the VP position in those days, and even to some degree today, was a very powerless position too.
Yeah.
When you become VP, you just kind of vanish into the background, and like you show up for formal events, and you'll occasionally go to Congress.
The vice president is meant to be the president's cheerleader and to be the president's voice whenever the House has too much to do.
Or to be the president because we need contingency plans. These guys don't last very long sometimes.
Especially when they're old white men.
Anyway, guys.
Yeah.
Back to the Gilded Age. There's another very fun thing that comes out of the Gilded Age, which is writing books that get banned.
Yeah. Banned books.
I didn't mention Mark Twain earlier.
Yep. There's a I mentioned that before the show started, but literary criticism takes off during the Gilded Age, and a number of authors redefine the American novel not just as, a pastime or a fancy or an epic, but as a vehicle to criticize the government and society at large. You have the name Gilded Age actually is derived from the first Gilded Age novel, which is titled The Gilded Age, written by Mark Twain and Charles Dudley, and it is a very honest and very angry look at actual Washington D.C. politics
My
of
boy
the
Mark Twain.
1870s.
He don't miss.
He is not, and he's not happy when he writes this book. He is not happy with the government when he writes this book. And this follows. There's three more keystone works that define it. There is Democracy by Henry Adams, who was a historian, writing about the time in which he lived. There is An American Politician by Frances Marion Crawford, which does lose itself, I believe, in its subplots rather than its critical view. And How the Other Half Lives by Jacob Riis, who is was kind of my favorite on this list just for his name alone. These basically all of these books make the American novel as a concept something that's almost expected to criticize society, to talk about how society is wrong, why society should be better, how it could be better. And those are exactly the sort of things that start the next American tradition of getting books banned from libraries, schools, and universities.
Always fun.
Because criticism makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, because if they criticize, people start to think and they go, "Wait, hold on."
Yeah, especially if the criticism hits close to home.
Wait a minute,
that's a
things
little
I thought
too
were default human nature are in fact, a product of my upbringing.
Who the fuck?
Oh no!
You mean people live very different lives and view the world extremely differently and are actually, and because of that, they are exploited to be essentially weapons of those in control to suppress those who aren't.
Wrong.
And speaking of weaponizing the people, that brings us to the last thing we have on our notes list here: nativism.
Yeah. Wait, no.
No, don't cheer that.
No, there is nothing. There's almost nothing in this entire script that is a good thing that happens.
Except the death of these people.
Yeah.
Even then, not really.
They're well, then they just spawn another one in there. The Hydra. Literally, two more Hydra. Spawn in their wake.
Yep, hail Hydra. So, with the industrialization of the United States, with all these factory jobs, there's mass immigration and emigration. Americans are emigrating from the farms, from agricultural life to the cities. And there's still more jobs than there are people, which means that for really the first time in US history, mass immigration is occurring. Immigrants are swelling the ranks of the American population and starting to actually outnumber the native-born Americans. Not the Native Americans, the native-born white people.
Yeah, we don't talk about the other kind of natives.
Yeah, but very important distinction.
Like the Italians, the Irish, the Chinese, they all came to work on the railroads.
Yep.
Don't forget, did you mention the Irish?
I did.
Yep.
I said the Irish, the Italians, and the Chinese.
Fun fact. By the Anglican white Americans that were living here at the time, none of those people were considered white.
Yeah, you'd regularly see signs that would say Irish need not apply, Italians not need to apply, Polish not need to apply.
Basically, white people were the English, the French, and maybe the Germans.
Oh yeah, because the Midwest was definitely heavily settled by German immigrants.
Super German.
There is documents a little about a century before this from Benjamin Franklin describing the swarthy Swedes. And swarthy is a term that means looks like black.
Oh, jeez.
So if you go to Scandinavia and tell me that most of the people there are black, it's really not.
No, they're all blonde.
But that was but the idea that European equaled white did not exist for these people, and the
At
fact
least not
that
in
a
this
lot
time
of these,
period.
yeah, and the fact that a lot of these immigrants settled within their ethnic groups are the reason why major cities will have Little Italy, Chinatown, and other such, culturally condensed areas, is because that's how these immigrants settled.
I would too. If you'd move somewhere foreign and bizarre, you would
Yeah.
definitely group up with people that are more familiar or speak the same language. 100%.
Oh yeah, even when I went abroad for some of my digs, even the one when I went to the UK, the Americans that were there, we huddled. We like huddled real quick, even though we were there with British and like other British people, and they did obviously they'd speak English, but like
Allegedly.
we like we were like yeah, we're the Americans here. We're like
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
we
don't.
we
Yeah,
we understand.
you don't want to get barneyed.
There was like a specific bond
Yeah,
that even though we only knew each other for like 10 days, we were like, as soon as we were at like the dig site, we understood each other. We understood experiences of just being an American in the UK. And I mean, obviously, like those are like that's a very like reduced sense like of what we experienced, but like
yeah,
it's like when people if you even see this actually with Americans when they find an American abroad that like they weren't
Expats.
expecting,
Yeah.
or just like also visiting. Like we found in a like we've met we actually met a former we actually met an ISU alumni in Pompeii just by complete happenstance, and we immediately like started like talking and everything about our experiences. So it makes sense for like groups like minority groups who come over to form like entire communities so they can support each other within a new foreign system that they have either that they willingly come to, usually willingly.
yeah, and this led to a lot of issues because people are moving in mass to the cities where the jobs are. Guess what's not in the cities?
Housing?
Yep. This creates tenement housing, which is basically a response to overcrowding, where basically what you do is you take a 1 bedroom single family apartment and divide it into four and have four separate families live in it.
Oh,
There
yikes.
is no ventilation and no plumbing. So naturally, all these places quickly become slums with that are ranked with diseases and overcrowding. Most of the time, researching this, there were pictures of people living in what is essentially a maybe 15 by 20 foot square space, 11 to 20 people.
Wow.
You slept in shifts. If you worked in the day, you were sleeping at night. If you worked at night, you slept in the day. That's all you did there. Uh, it's pretty bad, and yeah, that's the living conditions of the workers that are going to all these unions. And because there's all these immigrants, and because they're mostly keeping to themselves, fearful of this new potentially hostile environment, the environment becomes increasingly hostile because nativism rises up. And this is the beginning of the idea of America for Americans.
Uh, God.
It's just a
Specifically,
lot of rhetoric.
that the original rhetoric is that the native born white Americans should be protected from immigrants. They should have preferences for jobs. They should not be fired from their jobs because there's an immigrant that's willing to do the work cheaper. They should, if there is an immigrant in a job, they should be allowed to take that job from them. Uh,
Uh,
additionally, additionally, white Americans should have greater rights than immigrants. Simple things like voting and access to, sanitation and food. Because keep in mind, these are shortages that are going around at this time. There are less farmers and more people. Therefore, there is less food to go around.
yeah, agriculture doesn't really get another big boost until later.
Agriculture is going into decline right now because all
Yeah.
the people on the farms are leaving to go work in the factories.
Because remember, kids, farming isn't actually profitable, which is why a lot of farmers have to be given subsidies by the U.S. government
it makes me irate that those are the same people are like the government shouldn't be handing out money.
Yep. Yep. That'll do too. And finally, the third tenet of nativism is that immigrants should be banned or restricted from entering the U.S., and only certain kinds of immigrants should be allowed in.
Oh yes, the dawn of the immigration quotas.
Yep, immigration quotas. I believe there is a U.S. government puts in a ban on Chinese immigration, a total ban as a result of this, because guess what? It becomes popular enough for politicians to act on it.
Yep, these are also the same quotas that were used while Jews were fleeing Nazi Germany.
Oh yeah,
I believe, if I remember correctly,
there's-
at this time only 1,000 Jews were allowed per year into the U.S.
I do not believe this is. I don't know if that happened during the Gilded Age or a little bit later.
It's a little bit later, but
Yeah,
like
as
that's
like
the start of this.
we've got another like 50, 60 years for that. But yeah, there are
Like some
stories of Ellis Island turning away boats of people fleeing the Holocaust, and sending them to Nazi Germany to die.
Yeah, so all that starts with nativism.
It all starts right here. Um, yeah, and in case you're wondering, all the corporate greed, all the all the you know nativism, that we're talking about here. If this starts to look like modern America with the inefficient Congress and all that, it's because it is.
That's really all I've been thinking about this whole time. Is
Return.
just all the parallels. Like the names and companies have changed, but we still have mega monopolies of Amazon, Apple, Samsung,
Tesla.
Tesla,
That's
Oh,
right,
SpaceX,
that's not
Elon.
going to
like
be
all
around
those.
much longer.
I'm coming for you,
But like
Elon.
all those companies, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, this is a new gilded age, especially because a lot of these internet companies are not being busted for monopolies because we don't quite understand what the extent of their business is. Like
Funny enough, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Amazon Web Services run 75% of the internet's web traffic.
So funny enough, speaking of internet, the internet providers also actually have some, like, again, it's a bit tenuous, but you ever wonder why you can only really get one internet service, or like there might be one or two? Yeah, it's because internet companies can do essentially don't really divide it by region specifically, but sometimes in certain parts of counties and cities, you only get one or two internet providers. So yeah, if you're wondering why you
That's
get pretty slow internet, it's
Yeah.
because if you were to be able to get fast internet, you would not you would it create competition that these companies don't want.
Which is called market pooling, where you agree to divide up which parts of the market you cater to,
Exactly.
and is expressly illegal by the acts we have discussed here.
But of course, there's some sort of loophole that they get away with this. But like,
Because market pooling basically says you can't. It is the idea that you agree to be the only person providing service. It doesn't mean that you're the only person providing quality service. If everyone else is providing service that is garbage, that's technically not market pooling because they still
Yeah.
have competition.
So there's
It's bullshit.
there's a lot of parallels, and this is an important point that I do want to hammer home real quick. Of like, history is very cyclical. It happens in cycles, and things happen over and over again, which is why it's important to learn about this, because we're seeing an almost mirror image of this in the modern day, especially with Amazon hiring Pinkerton.
Yep.
Starbucks is going through a huge unionization.
Unionization.
Yes, that word is hard. A unionization spree where a bunch of stores are unionizing, and they're following the tactic of, you know what, this store wasn't actually profitable.
Yep.
so
Yeah,
speaking of Pinkertons,
Starbucks is following the Standard Oil model of basically saying, unions here, get rid of it.
I'm so glad you brought back up the Pinkertons, because like
Yep,
I said
so-
earlier, I have pulled up their website, and under our story, they do not mention anything about any rebellions, busting unions, any or strike, or even beating and harassing workers. They don't even mention the part where they were part of getting Jesse James and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But what they do mention is all of Alan Pinkerton, the founder, establishing the office, the first contract, hiring the first female detective for their company in 1856. Also, they mention how they protected Abraham Lincoln during the first assassination attempt.
They didn't do so good the second time.
And then they talk about they go on further
around the second time.
They talk about how they protected. They did like guard services during the war times, moving headquarters. Apparently, they also escorted the Mona Lisa painting across the Atlantic after it was stolen, I guess. But then they also talk about how they established offices in Asia and helped a bunch of expatriates from Indonesia during the Asian currency crisis, helped during Katrina, Rita, and Wilma.
Yep.
But
Aaron, they don't mention any of the bad stuff. And just speaking around to the point Justin made now, like 20 minutes ago, about Amazon using Pinkerton. So during the Gilded Age, we have the first labor unions, which are met with a lot of violence and intimidation. The instrument of this violence is, of course, the Pinkertons.
Yep.
The detectives were hired specifically to infiltrate, intimidate, and bust unions and striking workers. Hence the need for female detectives. Infiltration.
Oh.
People do not suspect. Yeah. Well, not so much infiltrate the seats, but who are you going to talk to? This random dude in a suit who showed up a week after you started causing trouble? Or this lady who's just passing through town and seems really nice?
Not only that, the wives of workers also talk. So they just need to be in the area and listen.
Yep.
No one would suspect.
Yeah. Yep. And to your point, the thing Justin mentioned about Amazon hiring the Pinkertons is the Pinkertons, being still in operation, were in the year 2020 hired by Jeff Bezos of Amazon to monitor his 16 hours no bathroom break warehouses to ensure that no talk of unionization was occurring. They were literally hired to eavesdrop and spy on all the line workers to make certain that nobody stepped out of line in the name of the bald man.
I like how they have a compliance and ethics session for their core practices, and it makes it like, yes, we're all about anti-corruption. We also target companies that do embezzlement, security violations, money laundering. It's like,
yep, so long as those companies are mom and pop shops competing with a Walmart.
Yeah, but as long as you pay them, they won't investigate you for those things.
Precisely.
Yeah, it's a pseudo mob, and so you might be thinking all hope is lost at this point, that it's cyclical, we're trapped in the new Gilded Age, but things are slightly better for everyone who doesn't work for Amazon.
True.
Because the Gilded Age, the expected workday was 10 hours on a 6-day work week, which had no safety regulations, no job protections, and no anti-discriminatory hiring laws. They could literally hire and fire you at will.
Some states that's still the case.
Yep.
Yeah, in some states they also still, or in some places they still make you work more than 6 days a week.
Yeah. There are federal regulations about anti-discriminatory hiring. Whether they're followed or not is entirely its own thing. But the one thing that is followed is children as young as 8 are expected to work the same hours and the same jobs, if not more dangerous jobs, than adults for less pay.
Because they can get in all the small spaces.
A lot of times what children were expected to do was clean or repair heavy machinery while it was operating. So good luck replacing a gear while the gear is turning, little Timmy. I hope you don't need that arm.
So funny enough, Hyundai actually got busted for violating child labor laws in Louisiana.
There you go. But
so yeah, companies will still do it.
Yeah, companies. Thank you for undercutting my point. Yes, it's all despair. We live in dystopia. What do you want from me, guys? We're working 10-hour workdays, 6 days a week. We never stop. Nothing gets better. Children as young as 4 are expected to build cars. What do you want?
Well, now we don't have to do that anymore. Sort of in America.
That still does.
We're
on paper.
some things got fixed. It's they're not able to get away with the same
You're
shit
talking
the same
a
way.
smelly turd or a polished turd. Either way, it's still a turd.
Does it no longer smell?
So nothing got better. Nothing got better and everything got worse. What is the point you want me to make? What is the point you want me to make here? You guys are clearly on the thesis that we're living in George Orwell's books.
I
Oh,
mean,
no.
there have been some improvements, but things have regressed slightly. But I think that's a good point and a good conundrum.
Happy first anniversary, everybody.
Let us
The end
know.
of the world.
Let us know what you think. Do you think things have gotten better or has it got worse? Leave a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts if you're on the side of me and Aaron or if you're on Colum's side.
Things might actually have gotten better in the last, 140 years. Anyway, it's been
Define
fun
better.
having a great first year with you guys. There will not be any interruption in our content as we jump from this season to the next season, like we do in December. The first ever video that will come out for our season 2 will be in HH Reads, I believe, on Friday, the 2nd of December. That will be HH Reads The Arrow and the Song, a lovely little poem about how our actions touch other people's lives. Very happy stuff to start off our second year.
And December will be a really great month if you enjoy our content because we are going to be trying to push daily uploads.
Yep. Additionally, for our podcast to kick off season 2 of the podcast, we will be doing the Khan Dynasty. So get ready for blood, torture, and a man who fathered more children than anyone else in history.
And
Good
a
for him.
terrible pun that will make Colum and Aaron both want to leave this podcast immediately. This is one that I came up with in like 7th grade, and it has been the greatest peak joke I've ever created.
As you can tell, some of us haven't matured since middle school.
And on that terrible bombshell, please be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks with the Khan Dynasty.